The colony ship had traveled for 47 years through the darkness between stars. Inside, 12 humans slept in frozen dreams while machines kept them alive. When they finally woke above Kepler 442b, they looked down at a world of amber forests and silver rivers. And they felt hope for the first time in decades. Captain Do-hyun was the first to step onto the alien soil. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm eyes that had seen too much. Behind him came his team. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and dreamers. They had left Earth because humanity needed new homes, and this world had been marked as possible. The Galactic Union had given them warnings. Many warnings. But humans were new to the stars, and they did not fully understand what those warnings meant. For 3 months, everything went well. They built shelters from materials the ship provided. They tested the water and found it clean. They planted seeds from Earth and watched them grow in alien soil. Dr. Yuna, the team's expert on alien life, spent her days studying the strange creatures that lived in the forests. Most were harmless. Some were beautiful. She filled notebook after notebook with drawings and observations. Then, on a morning when the twin suns rose red and gold, the sensors detected something large moving toward the camp. Yuna was in her laboratory tent when the alarm sounded. She ran outside and found the others gathered at the eastern perimeter, staring at the tree line. At first, she saw nothing. The amber trees stood tall and still, their leaves catching the light like pieces of fire. Then it moved, and she understood why the Galactic Union had warned them. The creature stood 7 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was covered in scales so black they seemed to eat the light around them. 6 eyes arranged in a curve across its massive skull reflected like dark mirrors. Its legs were thick as tree trunks, ending in claws that could tear through metal. When it breathed, the sound was like distant thunder. The Galactic Union called this creature a shadow maw. Their database said it was a Tier 9 extinction-level threat. This meant it was dangerous enough to end civilizations. 17 different species had tried to build colonies on this world. All 17 had failed. All 17 had run from the shadow maw. Private Hajin raised her weapon, her hand steady despite her racing heart. She was young, only 24, with short black hair and a face that still held softness from her childhood. But she was also a soldier, trained to protect her people. "Hold," Captain Do-hyun said. His voice was quiet but firm. "Everyone hold." "Sir," Hajin said, not taking her eyes off the creature. "That thing could kill us all in minutes." "Yes," Do-hyun agreed. "It could, but it has not." This was true. The shadow maw stood at the edge of the forest, 300 meters away. It was watching them. Just watching. Its 6 eyes moved slowly, studying the camp, the people, the strange structures they had built. It did not advance. It did not growl or show its teeth. It simply observed. Hours passed. The humans waited. Some sat down when their legs grew tired. Others went to get water and food, moving carefully, always keeping the creature in sight. The shadow maw did not move except to breathe. The Union liaison was a being called Consul Thrix. They were a Valorian, a species that looked like tall, thin humanoids made of something between glass and flesh. When light passed through them, it broke into colors. Right now, those colors were flickering rapidly, showing distress. "You must evacuate," Thrix said. Their voice came through a translator device worn around their neck. "You do not understand. The shadow maw does not observe. It does not wait. It kills. It kills. This is not normal behavior. Maybe not for the species you have seen before," Yuna said. She had found a chair and was sitting with a notebook in her lap, sketching the creature. "But we are not those species. You are small. You are soft. You have no natural weapons. Thrix's colors shifted to something like frustration. The Shadow Maw has killed beings far stronger than you. The Korvax had armor built into their skin. The Shadow Maw tore through it. The Melnari had poison in their blood. The Shadow Maw did not care. What makes you think you are different? Yuna looked up from her notebook. She was a small woman with gentle eyes and hands that were always moving, always curious. I do not know, she admitted. But I want to find out. As the afternoon faded into evening, the Shadow Maw finally moved. It turned slowly and walked back into the forest. Within moments, its black scales made it invisible among the shadows of the trees. The camp was silent for a long time. It will return, Thrix said. It will return with others, and they will kill you all. I am requesting emergency evacuation for your team. You will leave within the week. Captain Do-Yoon looked at his people. 12 humans who had given up everything they knew to come here, who had slept through decades of travel, dreaming of a new beginning. He saw fear in some of their faces, but he also saw something else: curiosity, stubbornness, hope. No, he said. Thrix's colors went wild. No, you cannot refuse. You will die. Maybe, Do-Yoon said. But we came here to build something. We did not travel 47 years to run away at the first sign of danger. He looked at each of his team members in turn. I will not order anyone to stay. If you want to leave with Consul Thrix, I will not stop you. But I am staying. One by one, the others spoke. I stay, said Engineer Taiwan, a big man with rough hands and a kind smile. I stay, said Sergeant Kyungwon, checking his weapon one more time. I stay, said Yuna, closing her notebook. I stay, said Hajin, finally lowering her gun. When it was done, all 12 had chosen to remain. Thrix stared at them with something that might have been wonder or might have been pity. I do not understand your species, they said finally. You know you will probably die, and still you stay. This is not logical. No, Captain Do-Yoon agreed. It is not logical. It is human. That night, they strengthened the perimeter. They set up more sensors and lights. They took turns keeping watch. But when the sun rose again, the Shadow Maw had not returned Dodd, or so they thought. Yuna woke early, as she always did. She liked to walk the edge of the camp in the morning, when the light was soft and the air was cool. She was halfway through her walk when she noticed something at the edge of the forest. A pile of meat. Fresh, still steaming in the cold morning air. Something had been killed and left there, just outside the camp boundary. She called the others. They gathered around the strange offering, none of them sure what to make of it. A trap? Hajin suggested. Possible, Do-Yoon said. But look at how it is placed. Carefully, not thrown. Placed. Yuna knelt down, studying the meat. It came from a creature she had seen before, a 6-legged animal that lived in herds near the river. Prey animals, food. It is not a trap, she said slowly. I think it is a gift. The others looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was. But deep in her heart, she felt something she could not explain. Something like recognition. Like the beginning of a conversation she did not yet know how to have. In the shadows of the forest, 6 dark eyes watched. And waited. 2 weeks passed after the first gift appeared. Then another came. And another. Every few days, the humans would wake to find fresh meat left at the edge of their camp. Always in the same place. Always carefully arranged. And always, when they looked toward the forest, they would see nothing. But they knew the Shadow Maw was watching. The Galactic Union did not know what to make of this. Their scientists sent messages filled with questions. Their military advisors sent messages filled with warnings. But no one could explain why the deadliest creature on the planet was bringing food to the small group of Humans like a cat leaving mice at its owner's door. Private. Hajin thought about this as she walked her patrol route along the western perimeter. It was afternoon, and the twin suns hung low in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. She carried her weapon, but kept it lowered. In 2 weeks, the Shadowmore had done nothing to threaten them. She was starting to feel foolish pointing a gun at the trees. Her patrol took her along a ravine that cut through the land like a scar. It was deep and narrow, filled with the strange crystalline plants that grew everywhere on this world. Their roots spread out like glass fingers, beautiful but dangerous. Hajin had seen small animals trapped in those roots, unable to escape as the crystals grew through their flesh. She was about to turn back when she heard the sound. It was not loud. It was not the thunder of the adult Shadowmaw. It was something smaller, higher, almost like crying, almost like a child in pain. Hajin moved toward the edge of the ravine and looked down. What she saw made her breath stop in her chest. A young Shadowmaw lay at the bottom of the ravine. It was perhaps 2 meters tall at the shoulder, maybe a quarter of the size of the adult they had seen. Its scales were not fully black yet. They held traces of dark blue around the edges, like bruises on the night sky. And its back leg was caught in a tangle of crystal roots that had grown through the flesh, trapping it completely. The creature saw her. Its 6 eyes, smaller than the adult's but just as dark, fixed on her face. It made that sound again, that broken crying, and tried to pull away. The roots held fast. Blood, dark purple and thick, dripped from the wound. Every training Hajin had ever received told her to back away. An injured predator was the most dangerous kind. It would lash out at anything that came close, driven mad by pain and fear. The smart thing to do was leave, report what she had found, and let nature take its course. But Hajin looked at those 6 eyes, and she saw something she recognized. She saw terror. She saw loneliness. She saw a child who had gotten lost and hurt, and did not understand why the world had become so painful. She sat down at the edge of the ravine, about 20 meters from the trapped creature. "Hey there," she said softly. Her voice echoed slightly off the ravine walls. "You are in a lot of trouble, are you not? I know how that feels. I really do." The young Shadowmaw stopped struggling. It tilted its massive head, watching her. "When I was 12 years old, I went hiking in the mountains near my home," Hajin continued. She was not sure why she was talking. It felt right. "I thought I was so smart, so grown up. I went off the trail because I wanted to find a waterfall I had seen in pictures. And I got lost." The creature made a low sound. Not the crying from before. Something softer, curious. "I walked for hours trying to find my way back. And then I fell. Broke my ankle. I could not walk. I could not call for help because my phone had no signal. I just lay there on the rocks, hurting and scared, for 2 whole days before someone found me." Hajin smiled at the memory, though it had not been funny at the time. "Those were the longest 2 days of my life. I thought I was going to die there. I was so alone." She looked at the young Shadowmaw. Its eyes had not left her face. "But you are not alone," she said. "I am right here, and I am not going to leave you." She talked for hours. She talked about her grandmother, who made the best food in the whole city and who always knew when Hajin was sad. She talked about her first love, a boy in her school who wrote her poems that were terrible but sweet. She talked about the day she decided to become a soldier, and the day she volunteered for the colony mission, and the long cold sleep between the stars. When her voice grew tired, she hummed. Old songs her mother used to sing when Hajin was small. Songs about mountains and rivers and hearts that kept beating even when they were broken. The young Shadowmaw stopped struggling completely. It lay still, its head resting on its front legs, its eyes half closed. It was listening. Hajin was sure of it. Somehow, despite everything, it was listening. When Dr. Yuna arrived with cutting tools and medical supplies, the sun was setting. She had been worried when Hajin missed her check-in, and she had come looking. What she found made her stand very still for a long moment. "Hajin," she said quietly, "what are you doing?" "Helping," Hajin answered simply. Yuna looked at the trapped creature, then at Hajin, then at the creature again. "That is a juvenile shadow maw. If the adult finds us here with its child, it will kill us." "Maybe," Hajin said. "Or maybe it will understand that we are trying to help." Yuna wanted to argue. Every scientific principle she knew told her this was insane. But she looked at Hajin's calm face, and she looked at the young creature that had stopped fighting and was watching them with something like hope. And she made a choice. They worked slowly, carefully. Yuna used the cutting tools to remove the crystal roots one by one, while Hajin talked to the young shadow maw in a steady, soothing voice. The creature flinched when the roots came free. It made small sounds of pain, but it did not attack. It did not even try. When the leg was finally free, they cleaned the wound and wrapped it in bandages. The young shadow maw watched everything they did with those 6 curious eyes. "We need to go," Yuna said when they were finished. "Before the adult comes." Hajin nodded. But before she left, she reached into her pack and pulled out a package of synthesized protein bars. They were meant for humans, but protein was protein. She tossed them gently toward the young creature. "Get better," she said. "And tell your family we said hello." They climbed out of the ravine and walked quickly back toward camp. Neither of them spoke. Both of them kept looking over their shoulders. They were almost home when the ground shook. The adult, shadow maw, emerged from the forest directly in front of them. 7 meters tall, black as the space between stars. 6 eyes that reflected the dying light like dark jewels. Yuna grabbed Hajin's arm. Both of them froze. The creature looked at them for a long, terrible moment. Then it stepped aside, leaving the path to the camp clear dot as they passed, moving as slowly and carefully as they could. The shadow maw made a sound. It was low and deep, more felt than heard. It rumbled through their bones like distant music. Later, when they analyzed the recording from Hajin's equipment, they would find that the frequency matched something in the Galactic Union's database. It was a sound the shadow maws made when greeting members of their own family. That night, after the twin suns had set, the adult shadow maw walked to the edge of the human camp. It carried something in its massive jaws. Another kill, another offering. But this time, it did not just leave the meat and disappear. This time, it lay down in the amber grass, just outside the perimeter lights. And it stayed there until morning. Captain Do Yoon watched from the observation post, his coffee growing cold in his hands. "What do we do?" Engineer Taiwan asked. Diane thought about Hajin's report, about the injured child and the song she had sung, about the sound the adult had made when it let them pass. "We do nothing," he said finally. "We let it stay." And so the creature that had terrified a galaxy lay down at the edge of the human camp, and for the first time since landing on this world, everyone slept peacefully. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A human colony on Kepler 442b had done the impossible. They had befriended a shadow maw. Within weeks, ships began arriving. Scientists from 17 different species came to study this strange event. They brought equipment, theories, and a deep disbelief that anything the humans said could be true. The Galactic Union sent its best researchers, led by a Mantari named Dr. Velcris. The Mantari were an insect-like species known for their brilliant minds. They had 4 arms, compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine, and they held 4 doctoral degrees on average. Dr. Velcris had 7. They had studied predator behavior across 9,000 worlds. They knew everything there was to know about how dangerous creatures thought and acted. They knew that what the humans claimed was impossible. "We will observe," Velcris announced on the first day. "We will document. And when the attack finally comes, we will have a complete record of your failure." Captain Doing smiled politely and said nothing. The research team set up their equipment at a safe distance from the camp. They had sensors that could detect the smallest movement, cameras that could see in complete darkness, and force fields that could stop almost anything. They were prepared for violence. What they got was something else entirely. The adult Shadowmaw, which Hajin had started calling grandfather, had become a regular presence at the camp. Every morning, he would emerge from the forest and settle in a spot near the eastern perimeter. He would lie there for hours, watching the humans work. Sometimes he slept. Sometimes he followed their movements with his 6 dark eyes. But he never threatened. He never attacked. The juvenile they had saved returned as well. Her leg had healed well, though she still walked with a slight limp. Specialist Yunji, the camp's medic, had made her a brace from spare parts. It was a simple thing, just some metal and polymer designed to support the damaged joint. The young Shadowmaw had let Yunji put it on without complaint. And now she wore it everywhere she went. Hajin had named her little sister, though she was already bigger than most Earth animals. The galactic researchers watched all of this with growing confusion. They recorded thousands of hours of footage. They analyzed every sound, every movement, every interaction. And they could not explain any of it. "The juvenile is playing," one researcher reported, their voice filled with disbelief. "She is playing with the humans." It was true. Little sister had discovered that humans liked to throw things and chase them. One of the engineers had tossed a broken piece of equipment toward the trash pile, and little sister had pounced on it, carried it back, and dropped it at his feet. Then she had waited, her 6 eyes bright with excitement, until he threw it again. Now it was a regular game. The humans would throw objects. Little sister would chase them. Sometimes she would bring them back. Sometimes she would destroy them with her claws, which made the humans laugh. "This is not predator behavior," Dr. Velcris said, reviewing the footage. "This is not prey behavior. I do not have a category for this." Dr. Yuna sat beside them, sipping tea from a metal cup. "Maybe you need new categories." Velcris's compound eyes shifted toward her. "You speak as though you understand what is happening." "Do you?" Yuna thought for a moment. "I have theories. Nothing proven. But I think the Shadowmaws are more intelligent than anyone realized. I think they have been watching every species that came to this world, studying them, testing them. And every species failed the test. What test? The test of kindness." Velcris made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been scorn. Kindness is not a survival strategy. In nature, the strong dominate the weak. This is universal. Sergeant Kyungwon had been listening from nearby. He was cleaning his weapon, a habit he kept even though he no longer expected to use it. "Maybe that is true on your worlds," he said. "But humans are different." "How?" "You are small. You are slow. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. By every measure, you should be prey." Kyunghwan smiled. "And yet, here we are, talking to you among the stars. Maybe strength is not about being the biggest or the fastest. Maybe it is about being the species that sees something hurt and scared and chooses to sit with it anyway." Velcris did not respond, but they watched more closely after that. The days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. The galactic researchers ran out of theories to test and predictions to make. The attack never came. Instead, something else happened. More Shadowmaws began appearing. At first it was just 1 or 2, lurking at the edge of the forest, watching the camp from a distance. Then more came. They did not approach as close as grandfather and little sister, but they did not attack either. They simply observed, as if waiting for something. Consul Thrix, who had stayed despite the danger, tried to explain this to the Galactic Union. "They are gathering," they reported. "I do not know why. This has never been recorded before. Shadowmaws are solitary. They do not form groups. But there are now at least 40 of them within 2 kilometers of the human camp." The Union's response was panic. They sent warnings. They offered evacuation. They predicted doom. The humans stayed. One evening, as the twin suns painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Hajin sat with grandfather at the edge of the camp. The massive creature had his head resting on his front legs, his eyes half closed in contentment. Little sister was nearby, playing with a group of human children who had been born in the colony's first year. They ran and laughed and climbed on her back, and she carried them with gentle care. Dr. Velcris approached slowly, their forearms folded in a gesture that meant deep thought among their species. "I must admit," they said to Hajin, "I do not understand." "Understand what?" "Any of this." Velcris gestured at the scene before them. "I have studied predators my entire life. I have seen countless species interact with dangerous creatures. Fear is always the result. Dominance or submission. Violence or flight. These are the only options." They paused, watching a human toddler grab little sister's ear and pull. The young Shadowmaw simply tilted her head, making a sound like a pleased rumble. "But you humans," Velcris continued, "you do not fit any pattern. When you saw grandfather, you did not run. When Hajin found little sister wounded, she did not attack or flee. She sat down and talked. She sang songs. This makes no sense." Hajin scratched behind grandfather's nearest ear, feeling the rough texture of his scales. "It makes perfect sense to us. Explain, please." Hajin thought about how to answer. "On Earth, we have animals that we made part of our families. Dogs, cats, horses. They were not always our friends. Long ago, they were wild and dangerous. But we learned to live with them. We learned to love them. And they learned to love us back. This took thousands of years of breeding and selection. Maybe, or maybe it started with one human sitting down next to one wolf and deciding not to be afraid." Hajin smiled. "We are good at that. At deciding not to be afraid. At reaching out instead of pushing away." Velcris was quiet for a long time. Then they said something they had never said before. Something that went against everything they had been taught. "Perhaps," they said slowly, "the galaxy has been wrong about what strength really means." That night, the Shadowmaws that had gathered around the camp moved closer. Not threatening, not hunting, just closer. And for the first time in recorded history, a species that had been classified as an extinction-level threat lay down among the buildings of another species and slept peacefully. The researchers recorded everything, but none of them could explain why. When they looked at the footage, they felt something strange in their chests. Something like warmth. Something like hope. Something they did not have a word for, but the humans did. The humans called it belonging. 6 months had passed since the humans first landed on Kepler 442b. The small survey camp had grown into something that almost looked like a village. There were proper buildings now, made from local materials and supplies from Earth. There was a medical center, a research laboratory, a school for the children who had been born in the colony. And everywhere, always, there were Shadowmaws. The galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible became normal. Humans and apex predators living side by side. Children playing with creatures that could swallow them whole. Scientists from across the stars coming to study what everyone agreed should not be possible. and then the Korath hegemony arrived. The warships appeared without warning. 80 of them, blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal insects. They were massive things, bristling with weapons, carrying armies that had conquered dozens of worlds. The Korath were an empire built on strength and violence. They took what they wanted, and no one had ever stopped them. Their leader, Supreme Commander Jarek, sent a message to the colony. His face appeared on every screen, gray-skinned and scarred, with eyes like black stones. "Humans of Kepler 442b," he said. "This world now belongs to the Korath hegemony. You have one day to abandon your settlement and leave. If you are still here when the sun rises, you will be destroyed." The message ended. The screens went dark. Captain Doyoung gathered his people in the central building. They were more than the original 12 now. 43 humans lived in the colony, including 8 children. They looked at him with fear in their eyes, waiting for him to tell them what to do. Before he could speak, Consul Thrix's voice came through the communication system. The Valorium was already aboard their ship, preparing to leave. "Captain Do-hyun," Thrix said, their colors flickering with distress. "The Galactic Union cannot help you. We have no military presence in this sector. The hegemony has 80 warships. You have nothing. This is not a fight you can win. We know," Do-hyun said. "Then you will evacuate? Our ship can take some of you. Not all, but some. The children at least." Do-hyun looked at his people. He looked at Dr. Yuna, who was holding a tablet filled with years of research she could not bear to leave. He looked at Hajin, whose hand rested on the wall as if she could feel grandfather's presence through the stone. He looked at the children, who did not fully understand what was happening but knew that something was wrong. "No," he said. "We will not run." The communication channel erupted with protests. Thrix, Velcris, other alien voices all talking at once, all telling the humans they were insane. They were doomed. They were throwing their lives away for nothing. Do-hyun waited until they were quiet. Then he spoke. "This is our home. Maybe we have only been here for 6 months, but it is still our home. We built it with our hands. We made friends here, friends that the whole galaxy said we could not make. We are not going to abandon that because someone with bigger guns tells us to. You'll die," Thrix said. "Maybe, but we will die on our feet in our home with our family around us. And if that is our fate, then we accept it." He cut the communication channel. That night, no one slept. They prepared what defenses they could, though everyone knew it was not enough. They said goodbyes. They held each other. The children were told that tomorrow might be difficult, but that no matter what happened, they were loved. Hajin went outside as the moons rose. Grandfather was in his usual spot, a dark mountain against the amber grass. She walked to him and sat down, leaning against his massive side. "Hey, old friend," she said softly. "I do not know if you understand what is happening, but some bad people are coming tomorrow. They want to hurt us. They want to take this place away from us." Grandfather made a low sound. His head turned, one of his 6 eyes focusing on her face. "We cannot stop them. We are too small, too weak. We do not have weapons like they do." Hajin felt tears on her cheeks but did not wipe them away. "I just wanted you to know, in case I do not get to see you again. I am glad I met you. I am glad I got to be your friend." Grandfather made another sound. Then, slowly, he raised his massive head and looked toward the stars, toward the ships that blocked out the light, and he began to call. The sound was unlike anything Hajin had ever heard. It started low, so deep that she felt it more than heard it. Then it rose, climbing through frequencies that made her teeth ache and her bones vibrate. It spread across the land like a wave, echoing off mountains, rolling through forests, reaching every corner of the world. Other voices answered. One at first, then 10, then 100. Shadow moths calling to each other in a language no human could understand. The sound built and built until the air itself seemed to shake. When the sun rose, the Korath landing craft descended. They came down 2 kilometers from the human settlement, safe behind their shields, confident in their power. 500 soldiers emerged, armed with weapons that could cut through stone. They formed ranks and began their march toward the colony. They made it 300 meters before they stopped. The shadow moths had come. They emerged from everywhere. From the forests, from the mountains, from caves and valleys no survey had ever mapped. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. They surrounded the human settlement in a ring of black scales and dark eyes, facing outward, facing the enemy. Grandfather stood at the front, directly in the path of the Korath advance. He was the largest of them all, 7 meters of muscle and scale and ancient, patient intelligence. And he was not alone. The Korath commander stared at the wall of apex predators before him. He had conquered many worlds. He had seen many defenses. But he had never seen anything like this. Doctor Yuna stepped forward, walking through the gap the shadow moths left for her. She walked until she stood beside Grandfather, small and fragile and completely unafraid. "You should know something," she said. Her voice broadcast on all frequencies, reaching the Korath soldiers and the ships above and the entire watching galaxy. This world is not undefended. It is not uninhabited. The shadow moths have lived here for millions of years, and they have decided that we are welcome here. She paused, looking at the rows of alien soldiers, at their weapons and their armor and their confidence. "You are not." The Korath commander laughed. "You think these beasts will save you? We have weapons that can kill anything. We will burn this world if we must." Grandfather took 1 step forward. Just 1. But the ground shook with it. Behind him, every shadow maw on the planet made the same sound at once. The call that meant family. The call that meant home. The call that, the researchers would later realize, also meant something else. It meant mine. The Korath soldiers were not cowards. They had fought across dozens of worlds. But they looked at those hundreds of dark eyes, felt the ground trembling, heard that sound that seemed to reach into their chests and grip their hearts. And they understood something. This was not a fight they could win. The landing craft lifted off within the hour. The warships withdrew from orbit by evening. And the Korath hegemony, for the first time in their history, retreated from a world they had come to conquer. That night, the humans celebrated. They lit fires and played music and danced under the stars. And among them, around them, protecting them like a living wall, the shadow moths stayed. Hajin found Grandfather where he always was, at the edge of the camp. She sat beside him and laughed and cried at the same time. "You understood," she said. "You understood everything." Grandfather lowered his massive head and rested it gently against her. His scales were warmer than she had expected. His breath was like a furnace, slow and steady, across the galaxy, in council chambers and military headquarters and scientific institutions. Beings of 100 species watched the recordings and tried to understand what they had seen. A species with no weapons had defeated an empire. Not through violence, but through something else. Something that the old and powerful races had forgotten was possible. Through friendship, through trust, through the simple act of sitting beside something wounded and choosing to help. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. 5 years had passed since the Korath hegemony fled from Kepler 442b. The small survey camp had become a real city now, home to over 10,000 humans and visited by thousands more from across the galaxy. They came as tourists, as scientists, as seekers of wisdom. They came to see the impossible with their own eyes. The Galactic Union had reclassified the planet. It was no longer listed as a death world, a place to avoid. It was now officially registered as a protected cohabitation zone, the first of its kind. Humans and Shadowmaws lived together under laws that recognized both species as equal citizens of the world they shared. Dr. Yuna had won every scientific award the galaxy had to offer. Her research papers were taught in universities on 1,000 worlds. But she did not care much about awards. She cared about understanding Dot, and finally, after years of study, she did. They were waiting, she explained to a conference of scientists from 30 different species. For millions of years, the Shadowmaws watched every species that came to their world. They tested them. They showed themselves, let themselves be seen, and watched what happened next. She showed images on the screen behind her. A timeline of failed colonies. Species that had come to Kepler 442b, seen the Shadowmaws, and immediately responded with fear. With weapons. With walls and barriers and plans for extermination. Every species saw them as threats to be destroyed or avoided. Every species responded to the unknown with fear and hostility. And so the Shadowmaws drove them away. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. She changed the image. Now the screen showed humans. The first survey team in their simple camp. Hajin sitting at the edge of a ravine, talking to a wounded juvenile. Children playing with creatures that could swallow them whole. And then we came. And we did something different. A Valorian diplomat raised a limb. But why? What made the Shadowmaws want connection in the first place? Predators do not seek companionship. It is not logical. Yuna smiled. Intelligence seeks connection. Loneliness is not unique to humans. Any being that thinks, that feels, that understands its own existence will eventually want to share that existence with another. The Shadowmaws are among the most intelligent creatures in the known galaxy. They have been alone on this world for millions of years. Can you imagine what that loneliness felt like? The room was silent. They were waiting, Yuna said again. Waiting for someone who would not be afraid. Waiting for someone who would see them not as monsters, but as potential friends. Waiting for someone who would choose kindness over fear. She paused. Looking at the faces before her, they were waiting for us. Far from the conference. In the city that had grown around the first human camp, Hajin walked her evening route. She was not called private anymore. Now she was Director of Xenobiological Relations, a title that still made her laugh. She was just a soldier who had once sat beside a wounded creature and talked until her voice gave out. Everything else had grown from that one simple act. Grandfather walked beside her. He was old now, older than anyone knew Shadowmaws could get. His scales showed patches of gray, like frost on black stone. His movements were slower than they had been. But every evening, without fail, he found Hajin, and they walked together as the twin suns set. Consul Thrix told me something interesting today, Hajin said. They had reached their favorite spot, a hill that looked out over the city and the forest beyond. She sat down, and Grandfather lowered himself beside her with a sound like a mountain settling. They said the Shadowmaws are teaching their young about us. On purpose. Like they are passing down knowledge from generation to generation. Grandfather made a low rumble, contentment, understanding, approval. They are teaching them that humans are safe, Hajin continued. That we can be trusted. That we are family. She leaned against his warm side, feeling the slow rhythm of his breathing. Below them, the city sparkled with lights. She could see humans and Shadowmaws moving through the streets together. Children rode on the backs of juveniles, laughing and waving. Adults stopped to chat with creatures that towered over them, conversations of sounds and gestures that had developed naturally over years of living together. All those centuries, Hajin said softly. All those species running away from you, attacking you. calling you monsters. And all you wanted was for someone to stay, for someone to sit beside you and not be afraid. Grandfather turned his great head to look at her. 6 eyes, dark as the space between stars, reflecting the lights of the city below. He made a sound she had come to know well. A sound that meant family. A sound that meant home. A sound that meant love. Nearby, a group of children played in the amber grass. Human children and young shadowmaws tumbled together, chasing and wrestling and making sounds that were definitely laughter. One of the juveniles was little sister's first offspring, already bigger than a human car, but gentle as a lamb. Captain Dohyun, now called Governor Dohyun, watched from the observation deck of the administrative building. He was older now, his hair fully gray, his face lined with years of work and worry and joy. Beside him stood a diplomat from the Galactic Council, a being Dohyun did not recognize. "I must ask," the diplomat said, "when you first saw the Shadowmaw, were you not afraid?" "Terrified," Dohyun admitted. "Then why did you not run? Why did you not fight? Why did you not do what every other species has done?" Dohyun thought about the question for a long time. He watched the children play. He watched Hajin and grandfather on their hill. He watched the sun set over a world that had become home. "Because we decided to be different," he said finally. "We decided that being the kind of species that assumes the worst about others was not who we wanted to be. We decided to be the species that offers help before assuming hostility, that sits down next to something wounded and keeps it company, that reaches out with an open hand instead of a closed fist." He turned to look at the diplomat. "We decided to be kind, and in a galaxy full of fear, that turned out to be enough." The diplomat was quiet for a long moment. Then they said something that surprised Dohyun. "I think," they said slowly, "that perhaps my people have been doing things wrong for a very long time." Dohyun smiled. "It is never too late to change." The sun's finished setting. The stars came out, familiar now after years of watching them. Somewhere in the forest, a shadowmaw called out, and others answered, voices rising in a chorus that spread across the land. Hajin listened to the song. She had learned to understand some of it over the years. Warnings and greetings. Announcements of hunts and celebrations. And now, woven through it all, a new theme that had not existed before humans came. Welcome. Family. Home. She scratched behind grandfather's ear, feeling the rumble of his contentment vibrate through her entire body. "Thank you," she whispered, "for waiting, for trusting, for letting us in." Grandfather made a sound that needed no translation. Then he rested his massive head against her shoulder, and together they watched the stars wheel overhead dot in the city below. A human child who had never known a world without shadowmaws climbed onto the back of her best friend, a juvenile twice her size. The creature carried her carefully, gently, as though she were the most precious thing in the universe, because to them, she was. This was what humans had brought to the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology, not power or wealth or conquest, just this. Just kindness. Just the willingness to see a monster and choose to see a friend instead. And in the end, that had changed everything. The stars shone down on Kepler 4, 42b. On a city of humans and shadowmaws, on a world that had finally stopped being alone. And somewhere in the distance, in the call of creatures that had waited millions of years for someone to understand them, there was something that sounded very much like joy. This was home. For all of them. Forever.